which of course doesn't want to play.
I remember TV.
20 seconds. 15 seconds. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
In your face, all over the place. We're online 24/7. 24/7. You're listening to the hottest internet station.
From beautiful Saline in southeastern Michigan.
Around the world at sunsky.mysteries.com.
This is the 2009 Top 10 Webcam in the World winner. This is SETV.
Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of Surrounded by Idiots. And we have made contact with our guest. We are apparently streaming online, I hope, with all the computer problems that we've been having over the past 15 or 20 minutes. Who knows at this point? You know, folks, there are some avenues of research that typically lead to those tragic one-car accidents in the garage. Our guest tonight is one of those researchers that sometimes the powers that be really don't like messing in their business. Forget for a moment that business affects we humans on the ground. They seem to conveniently forget that. Now, what we're going to be talking about tonight is something that's called chemtrails. Chemtrails are long and line-shaped cloud formations artificially created by flying aircraft which are not formed by condensation of water vapor in the aircraft's exhaust. While in fact the typical white trails left by traditional airplanes flying at high altitude last only a few minutes and are formed by condensation of water vapor in the aircraft exhaust, chemtrails are supposedly filled with chemical substances employed specifically for supposed atmospheric and weather modification, biological testing, or other classified purposes. And we have some amazing images. We have actually some chemical data testing charts for you. And I am now going to bring in our guest, Scott Stevens, the owner of weatherwars.info. Scott, how are you?
I'm pretty good today, Bill. And yourself?
I am excellent, as a matter of fact. And
Good
it appears that we actually have some listeners on the audio stream, so I think that's actually working. Yay! I love it when stuff actually works.
It's good when it all works.
It's good when it all works.
It's good.
Bring up your website for the people that are watching the video stream. There you go. There is Scott's website right there, weatherwars.info. You have a YouTube channel also, don't you, sir?
I've got a YouTube channel that's also Weather Wars, and then Facebook as well. And that's kind of where a lot of the discussion, where a lot of the activity has kind of migrated, is off to Facebook. So that's where the interaction is beginning, because there's so many groups that have been formed about weather modification, about HAARP activities, about the chemtrails, and they seem to have found home on Facebook. So that's where that movement is right now.
Mm-hmm. So what's the latest news, the latest information, the latest poop, if you will, about chemtrails? How far are we into the analyzing this? Bring us up to date on what's going on.
Well, you know, I didn't come into this scene, if you want to identify it that way, until probably the late 90s. And I, as a television weatherman, was struggling with accuracy issues. in particular in the winters, because I was up in the Pacific Northwest at the time, and storm after storm was just not behaving properly, and I was getting a bit frustrated with it. And at the same time, I would come into work and would read the discussions from the guys off in Washington D.C., and they're trying to get their heads around what's happening out in the Pacific, because I was in Idaho, and our weather comes from the Pacific. Mm-hmm. And time after time, we'd forecast a snowstorm and it wouldn't materialize. You would forecast, a sunny day and it wouldn't materialize. It would end up cloudy. And so these events are something that the science and the models and our experience should have us, with a good handle on, and that was not the case. We were just busting forecast after forecast. And it was at this time I was coming across the term chemtrail. And I've always been an alternative media guy. Worked in the mainstream. To find out what's really going on, we got to go to the alternative media stream. Because I promise you, any story that hits the nightly news and they give you 90 seconds, there's 6 minutes of news there. And they're gonna usually bias one side of the story. That's just a function of the limitation of the times that the producers give the reporters to present a topic. So I always knew there's another side to the story. But I was coming across this term chemtrail, and I was seeing pictures of DC-9s or MD-80s as they're termed now, and 737s with these persistent trails. And I'm like, well, that's a contrail. People, don't your weather stuff? And, the stories just kept coming, and then there's biological experimentation. There are all kinds of other things, other issues that were showing up around this term, and the meteorology, the terminology was just not correct. And so I thought, I need to figure out what's going on. I can get to the bottom of the story with the information and education that I've had. And then 9/11 happened, and that kind of drove me even farther down this rabbit hole. At the same time, I was researching alternative energies, free energies, energy from the vacuum, zero-point energy, those kind of things. And I'd come across the work of a man by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Bearden. And Lieutenant Bearden's work was in scalar energy. His background was he was in Army intelligence. He's a physicist, a nuclear physicist. And he was seeing things that were not right. And in his investigation during the 80s was that the Russians were not, trying to match us bomb for bomb, but were actually working on something very different. And apparently, according to Lieutenant Colonel Bearden, there was an arms race, as we all know, the Cold War. And Joseph Stalin told or essentially dictated to his military to get me something that the Americans don't have, something the Americans are not working on, something that would be a surprise to them. And so they eventually secured and employed almost 10,000 physicists, and the program was termed energetics. And this energetics dealt with pulling energy from the vacuum to create cold explosions, or to down airplanes at a distance, or to create Tesla domes, which would protect a city from inbound ICBMs. There is no limit to what this program would enable them to do with the right understanding and investment. So, that had my attention. And one of the things that Bearden had on his site was a sidebar, and it was titled Soviet Weather Engineering. That immediately gets my attention. And so I kind of read through, and to be honest with you, the physics was over my head. But what was there were photographic examples. These were pictures of clouds that had like big spokes or radials in them, or gridded patterns. And I thought, well, this is kind of curious. It's not terribly pronounced, but I can see the patterns. I can see the resonances in there. And, within 2 or 3 months, I bought a digital camera, and this was 2001, and I started taking pictures. Mm-hmm. Something happens, Bill, when you start looking at the sky with a different eye, when you start looking for patterns, when you start looking for resonances, you start to see them. There they are. And so I started taking pictures. And this was really even before I had realized that chemtrails was a part of the deal. It was out there, but I saw no relationship between the two. But over the 3 years, from 2001 to 2004, I started studying high-resolution satellite imagery and began to see the radios, began to see odd holes, cubed patterns, just geometry that does not or would not exist naturally in a fluid. And one of the classes you must take when you're studying meteorology is fluid dynamics. And what we're seeing and what I was beginning to see in the sky, or what I was shown to look for, were these patterns which do not occur in fluids. And so that was a big flag for me. And there was one day in 2004 when I was archiving high-resolution imagery, there was a satellite picture. And my stomach sank because of what it meant to me. I was okay with there being weather modification, that they can amplify hurricanes or juice up a thunderstorm here or there, or accentuate a drought. But what I wasn't ready to accept, that a minor cold front on a June afternoon in Montana was replete with this geometry.
In fact, we've got it up on the screen now. The image the satellite image from your website.
Yeah, it was June 6th, and in Universal Time, in UT time, or Zulu time, it was June 7th, and it was maybe 1Z, so it was early in the evening, and there was a square cloud sitting over Billings, Montana. That's what first caught my attention, and then there was the square shadow underneath it. And I looked off to the west a little bit, and there was the remainder of the minor cold front, and there was a gap in the clouds, and it was sized and shaped perfectly from that cloud that was out 100 miles ahead of it over Billings, Montana. And so what my realization is that the atmosphere had essentially been digitized. And we know what digital means. It's that something is on or off. And that they're an isolated cell, like a cell on your cathode ray tube or your LCD TV screen. A picture is a composite of many pixels. Mm-hmm. And that the weather had essentially been pixelized. And that if you can control a 3 mile by 3 mile or a 30 mile by 30 mile, square or unit of the atmosphere, you can then begin to steer, shift, and modulate the jet stream in ways that would serve whatever your agenda would happen to be at the times. So that was my awakening. And even once I had come to terms that there was global weather modification going on, I still didn't know what the chemtrails were for. I didn't know. I could see them. I was recognizing that they were up there, but what was their purpose? Why would they choose to spend millions of dollars daily flying what had to be many dozens of aircraft? And as I later came to understand, is that number here on this continent, this North American continent, essentially from southern Mexico through the northern latitudes of Canada, and then deep out into the Pacific, then off into the Atlantic, it's going to require somewhere between 1,400 and 2,000 aircraft to do that. That's a lot of bloody planes.
That's insane.
That's a lot of planes, and that is a huge expenditure. But then you think, okay, we have black off-budget projects that are, 10 years ago, it was $30–40 billion, and then who knows what kind of monies come out of the back of the Federal Reserve or are engaged in the shadow banking system. $1 trillion in the shadow banking system is much, much less than in the public banking system. So, you've got companies that will certainly pony up to the trough and feed like pigs when they're given these kind of projects to fund and to work out. So, as a weatherman on at the time, I was striving to give my audience the best forecast. Because if I give them a bummer of a forecast, I have to get up in front of them the next day and talk about it. You can't just ignore what didn't happen or what did happen. That doesn't just go away. This is something that you have to rectify with the audience. You've got a 4 to 8 inch snowfall and you get a trace. You got to make good on that. You've got to explain what happened. And what I wasn't able to do is explain what happened until I had that epiphany about, how profound this weather modification is. So I learned that when you've got a snowstorm coming and you begin to see warming in the cloud tops, and what I was seeing was this was happening often, that you'd get on the infrared imagery, which is just about all the weather guys on TV will show you is infrared imagery, that there'll be warming zones. And when these warming zones, these holes open up in the clouds, that essentially takes away the opportunity for moisture to fall. You're not going to get the condensation. You're not going to get the droplet size to grow. You're not going to get the snowflakes to crystallize to a size sufficient enough for them to fall out of the sky. That just was not happening. So I would have a forecast out for snow, and should be going to bed, but I'm staying up late, waiting, watching the radar, seeing if this snow is going to show up. And it's 2 a.m, and the radar was showing us the snow coming closer, and it would just never arrive. What's going on here? And so I'd step outside, look up. It's 2 a.m. I'm in eastern Idaho. There's no jet traffic, but I'm hearing planes. I'm hearing planes low and slow, and they're at level flight, because you can tell when a plane is descending into an airport or climbing. The engines sound different. The plane sounds different. So I could tell that they were low and slow and in level flight. So I'm like, what are they doing? What are they doing up there? So the next step was to spend a little money. So I bought cameras. I bought 4 cameras. I bought 2 computers, and I bought time-lapse software, and then wired the house. And so basically at sunrise, the cameras, or the computers, would trigger the cameras to start doing photography. They would take pictures every 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds, depending on what I felt for the day. Mm-hmm. And I would come home from work and then render the movies and analyze to see what happened. What I had hoped, Bill, was that I could see some behavior in the clouds that I could learn from, that I could then take to work the next day and give my audience a better forecast. But after 4 months of this, what I captured on a sunny April afternoon was a series of about 11 flights off to the southwest, out of one of the windows that I had cameras running. And it was a fairly dry day. It was a day that there would be no trails. It just wouldn't be possible. The air was simply too dry. Right. But every one of these 9, 10 planes was leaving a trail. But they didn't necessarily stick, except for one. One of the trails, it was a straight east-west trail, stuck. And then it slowly faded at the ends. But what was fascinating is what happened next. There were 2 other planes came along, and one of them split that trail that was remaining in half. And I thought, that's just a funny coincidence. And then maybe 2 minutes later, another plane came along and kissed the western end of what was left of that visible trail. So then I had the next aha. It's about geometry. It's about how these trails fade away or persist. And the trails that persisting were leaving something visible in the sky that was of interest to these weather guys, these weather makers. And they had to go up there and measure it. They had to define the boundaries of where these trails were staying visible. And then I began to look at the skies with different eyes. I was already kind of buying cameras and doing video cameras because I wanted to document this stuff to share with people. And so through that summer of 2005, I understood that they were up there using these trails either as markers, measurers, or simply as tools to see the invisible action of these scalar waves or these ionospheric pulses that would come from a HAARP-like apparatus and how they impact the atmosphere. And if you're going to target, say, a specific area where you're on the western edge or ahead of a thunderstorm line, you got to drop this energy very, very precisely. Otherwise, you're just going to bungle things up. And so they need these trails so they know where they're targeting their directed energy weapons or where they're stimulating high cloud growth with ionization. They have to have these trails out there to accomplish an aspect of accurate weather modification. I mean, the Russians could be doing that in the 70s and 80s over the States, but they're kind of going blind. They're doing it blindly because they would have a few satellites up in space looking down on the Americas, but it doesn't give them the precision of having 1,200 aircraft aloft taking real-time measurements of what the atmosphere is doing. And that's what I see happening. And that's, in my opinion, and from years of observation, that's what's happening with these trails in the sky. So it's complicated. There are patents for making chemtrails more persistent. Many of those were filed in the early 70s, and those were Navy projects to make trails last longer. You can change the energy budget of the planet if you can put a metallic sheet over an area at night, and that's going to keep in heat. Or you can shield the sun during the course of the day, so you begin to manage that energy budget somewhat. There's all this talk about global warming, and with the chemtrails and all of the additional cloud covers that they engineer by the addition of these powders into the sky, is the planet really warming or cooling? And I really don't know that we know for sure. Because with weather modification having gone on now for the better part of 35 years, I don't think we have a baseline. I think we've lost that baseline of what the planet's atmosphere is truly doing.
So in other words, we don't know what the heck is going on at this point.
I don't think we do. I really don't think we do. And with all of these barium and aluminum and strontium and titanium and these other metallic metals that are in the sky in the micron size, the atmosphere is far more conductive than it has been, in decades past, to the tune of 4 times more conductive. So you're going to see, out of a typical thunderstorm, you're going to see more lightning. The strokes are going to be more intense. The risk of dry lightning or thunderstorms which are creating lightning but no rain, because we see that in California as the monsoon starts to get going, the moisture's not there to put down rain associated with it, so we get these high-based, low precipitation thunderstorms, and they're dangerous. They're dangerous for the forests when you're in a drought. And much of the West has been gripped in drought for years now. So there's just a lot going on up there. There's a lot going on up there, Bill.
On the screen right now for the audience, I have the list. Let's see. This was done in May of 2008. The list of chemicals they found in some samples of what was falling out of the sky. There's 13 items, half of which I can't
even pronounce,
including number 10.
Is this Phoenix?
Yes, including number 10, my favorite, human white blood cells, a restrictor enzyme used in research labs to snip and combine DNA. That's perfect. And what we see here on this chart is barium is 278 times, copper is 98 times, and manganese is 5,280 times the toxic limit level in the air when they're dropping this stuff. Now, on your site, up at the top of one of the pages, you have a quote from the Secretary of Defense, William Cohen, from April of 1997. And he said, others are engaging in an echo type of terrorism whereby they can alter the climate, set off earthquakes, volcanoes remotely through the use of electromagnetic waves. So there are plenty of ingenious minds out there that are at work finding ways in which they can wreak terror upon other nations. It's real, and that's the reason why we have to intensify our efforts.
Curious quote.
Yes, and there's another, and there's a book that you have a link to. It's called Policy Implications of Greenhouse Warming. Cloud stimulation by provision of cloud condensation nuclei appears to be a feasible and low-cost option.
Indeed. Indeed.
But how far into that have you gone?
I think we're all the way. All the way. They had such success with weather engineering in Vietnam. And a man by the name of Ben Livingston was in the Navy and was key in those programs. And I think they came back from that in the 60s and early 70s and said, guys, we have an incredible tool. And we can pull things off and it'll never point back to us. There's no fingerprints. There's nothing on it. And so they can have these incredible weather events. And you Google extreme weather in the United States in 2011, and there has been no year, like 2011. I think the total net expense in weather-related events was upwards of $360 billion, and I think that was globally. That's huge. It's a huge economic stimulus, if you think about it. It's stimulus.
We have a question that has come in from the chat room regarding this, the chemical analysis. And the question is this. Do you think one of the things that they're trying to do is actually change our physical chemistry.
I think that's a given. I think that's a given. Now, I would like to say that there's probably a caveat with those numbers. I think they're probably too high. What I don't know is how long, because he gathered those numbers by setting up essentially an air filter outside.
Right.
And he ran the HEPA filter to essentially filter the air and catch the particulates on the filter, and then he sent that filter off to different labs so he could have a couple of different sets of data to look from. And this data, if I remember correctly, is an averaging of those lab results. I believe the EPA's numbers are particulates per cubic meter.
Right.
If he ran more than 1 cubic meter of air through those filters, his numbers are going to be off.
Aha.
And that's what we don't know. And I would anticipate, because my HEPA filter, if you run it for more than 3 seconds, you've run more than a cubic meter of air through it. So if he's run that thing for minutes or hours, then his numbers are not going to bear any resemblance to reality. They're going to be way too high. What it will give you is the ratio of what is most common in the atmosphere. You'll see aluminum, you'll see barium, you'll see that list of 10 being totally valid, and in probably that order. But the numbers that are on that graph, I think, are probably skewed high. I think they're skewed high, and I think they're probably skewed very high. So, that's just, it's out there, we're breathing it, but I think those numbers are a bit on the high side.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too, because there'd be people dropping dead from this stuff.
Exactly. And not that there aren't health effects from what's in the air, because I think if you're constantly breathing that on a cumulative effect of years, then there's going to be some issues. There's going to be some issues. And when you look at what aluminum, and particularly nano-sized aluminum, does to the body, it's not pretty. It's really not pretty. Parkinson's and Alzheimer in particular show up high on that list.
Yeah. And
then the aluminum ends up, since it's positively charged, it ends up collecting all places in the body, and cancers can result from that. So,
now, I'm gonna show
there's stuff up there.
I'm going to show the audience something that actually happened to me this past summer at our. It's basically our survival place in northern Michigan. It's directly on the 45th parallel.
Nice. And
whenever I'm up there, I always have my cameras out, have my cameras going, because we have an Air National Guard artillery base nearby. And we constantly have F-16s and A-10 Warthogs and Chinooks and everything flying over. And it's just great. It's like your own personal air show. I mean, these guys are live firing down there. You can see the shells coming out of the A-10s as they fly over this thing. I mean, it's great. They've done full scale war exercises where they've had B-2s and Chinooks and B-52s coming over all day long, and I love going up there simply because of that. But this past summer, the land that we're on is higher than the land around it.
Okay.
And we have our own private lake and everything there, and it's in northern Michigan, it's pine forests. And around this is probably a couple of million acres of virgin pine forest, with little communities scattered in between. And we are probably maybe 300 feet higher than the surrounding forest on the particular plot of land where we are. So if you're flying an aircraft at, say, 1,000 feet, all of a sudden you're at 600 feet when you come over this area where we are. It's called the Antrim Shale Deposit, and it's like a ridge that goes across central Michigan. Well, last summer, I was inside, and my bad timing, because I wasn't outside right at the beginning of this, but I came outside, and there's a contrail directly over my head, maybe 400 feet away.
That's pretty low.
It was...
That's freaky low.
Amazing. Let me zoom in on this so the audience can see exactly how low this thing was. It was amazing. So I got out my camera and I started snapping photographs. And up there during the week, which is when I was up there, it's dead quiet. There's no people around or anything. Everybody's at work. It's dead quiet. You could actually hear the particles in this thing hissing in the air. It was the most bizarre thing. And one side of this thing was absolutely straight, and the other side was like little corkscrews. And within maybe 20 minutes, and folks can see this on the screen right now, within 20 minutes, this thing had spread out into an actual cirrus cloud.
It happens quickly.
And 30 minutes after that, almost half of the sky was filled.
Wow.
Well, so my question for you is, because you've been in this a lot longer than anybody else has, what the hell are they putting in this stuff that can actually cause these clouds to... I mean, I'm serious, it was a dead, clear sky.
But see, all you have to do is put up there, of the appropriate size, something for moisture to be attracted to. And if you're going to ionize them, and it only takes a gentle ionization for the water to literally say, over here, guys, and then it just rushes into place. And these charged particles act as a condensation nuclei. And as that nuclei picks up, the oxygen and hydrogen, it begins to assemble the water, then very quickly we have a cloud that takes place. And it's difficult for the untrained eye to see that transition from a powder cloud to a water cloud. It happens gently, and it happens over time. And unless you've got a camera up there and you're kind of just taking regular shots, you're going to miss the transition. But so often we'll start with a blue sky day, and you'll see then the marking or the persistent trails, the ones where it's just like they've opened the back of the plane, out it comes. And eventually the next state over, you've got a cirrus shield. Now yesterday, I'm in southern Colorado. I'm up at 8,000 feet again at our survival location. On the satellite imagery, when I woke up and I started looking at that stuff, there were hundreds of trails across Utah, Nevada, California, and then extending out into the Pacific. I mean, it was obscene how thick they had painted these trails up. And so by afternoon, we were under what was, cirrus clouds that were probably half of the altitude that they should normally be at. They should be in the mid-20s to low 30,000 foot. These were cirrus-like clouds because they weren't true cirrus, almost a stratocirrus. But they were, 12,000 feet, sub 14,000. So just too low.
That's exactly it. The one that I saw, and I'm showing the video that took of this. It's a 720p video, and it's a bizarre thing. They spread out into cirrus clouds, and these things, I'm serious, were just a few hundred feet above me.
Yep. That's great. One of the things that I would really like to do is get up there, at 20,000 feet and watch the clouds, watch the trails move over the course of a day or two. Because, sitting on the ground, we have a very flat, very two-dimensional view of the sky. We miss that depth. We miss those angles. Very few of these chemtrail planes are a level flight. Rarely are the trails parallel to the horizon. They're at an angle. They're sloped upwards or sloped downwards. And that gives them the ability to sight along these trails, much like a sniper would with his rifle, being the trail, and then the laser sight. And so then the energy comes along the trail, comes along the sight. So you can line up the introduction of these waves into the atmosphere very, very precisely, especially if you have a line of sight that's 2 miles long or 20 miles long. But what is most interesting about them, after they lay down some of the marking ones, Bill, watch to see how they deform. See how they become misshapen. They twist and they bend and they break and they disperse, and the gaps will show up. Then watch where the cross flights come, because rarely will you see just one plane laying down one trail.
Right.
There's always a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth. There's always a sortie or a fleet. They're all working together, and they're very interested in how the precedingly laid down trail is behaving. Sometimes the powders will dissipate, and you'll see the wingtip vortex, those tubes persisting, but the powders will fade away. And another plane will come along and mark precisely where the powders have faded or begin to remain visible or fluorescing. But it really is how that first trail dissipates that is let's say, illuminating some kind of atmospheric phenomena, or meteorological or dimensional, because some of it may even be dimensional. There's dimensional phenomena going on as well, that this program enables them to see, to visualize. So,
aren't they worried about the layperson on the ground seeing it?
Not anymore. Not anymore. You know, the oldest pictures I've got of these trails comes from March of 1976, and that's in Ohio. So the program's been around for a long time, and they've kind of got the education streams, you know, sewed up. You know, there's not a lot of free-thinking people anymore. You know, I know there's other TV meteorologists, because I've had communications with a few of them, but they're not going to bring it up because it's a paycheck. You know, they need a job. They need a job. I needed a job, right. You know, but there was just some part of this that was just so out of place that I needed to talk about it. I had to talk about it. I needed to explain why my forecast wasn't right the night before. It wasn't my fault. You know, there's somebody mucking with the weather. And so that means that when you're modeling, and these weathermen in D.C. or in Denver or wherever they happen to be, you know, look at the forecast models, that there's some delta, there's some bit of data that isn't being accounted for, and until that is introduced into the models, short and long term, but that's going to require these models that the civilian weather people use be linked up with this program, so that we see what's going to happen. And Bill, I promise you, when this gets public, and once the people have access to what's really happening weather-wise, there's no reason why you couldn't have an app on your phone that will deliver you the forecast for Saturday. And it would be maybe 2-hour increments. They can give you temperature, they can give you wind direction, and they could probably knock down to within 30 minutes when the rain will start, and a good estimation of how much you'll get, or snow. They're that good.
Yeah, the weather forecasting is unbelievable.
This is true. It is unbelievable. But I think that's something, if we were able to have public oversight and a far greater public awareness of this, that would be one of the end results, is that we get accurate forecasts. And we'd probably be able to mitigate a great deal of the damage that the weather has done. You know, the planet simply still has to move a lot of heat and cool, because the Earth is tilted 23.5 degrees to the sun. That's an extreme, you know, seasonal oscillation that we have to go through. And so you're going to have, you know, the profound mixing of the warm and the cool. That's going to happen. You know, it's just about not letting, you know, the tornadoes go to F5 and roll through Joplin. You know, that could have been mitigated, so it was, you know, a rope-based F0, F1 tornado. That could have easily happened.
Well,
you know,
why didn't they do that then?
Well, it's like you said, it's not about us, it's about them.
I mean, they're doing this stuff, and it's like, why, if they can stop a tornado like that, an F5 tornado from forming, or don't they have the time to
no, they have the time.
Do their control procedures?
I've been on storm chases. I've been in North Texas with tornadoes on the ground, and I've seen Chinook helicopters off in the distance watching. So they're aware of what's going on. They're keenly aware of what's going on. So why are we in Afghanistan? Why are we in Iraq? Why are we in all of these other countries? You know, a lot of what happens by the powers that be, or by the military-industrial complex, is not. They don't feel the need to explain it to us. And so we just have to presume and speculate at their motives from what they're actually doing and what is actually happening. You know, so that's a question that I would love to present to somebody. You know, is the why. Just because you can doesn't mean you should be doing it to this degree and to this end. You know, I think one of the main reasons that they kind of, well, I don't know if it's a main reason, but it's a reason. You know, it's the global warming debate. Mm-hmm. They used, you know, all of their capital, political capital, to try to get, you know, laws passed that, you know, would have people feeling good about being green and reducing carbon input. And, you know, some of it just kind of stinks to high heaven. You know, I have no, you know, the plants like carbon dioxide. It's their fertilizer. So for the plants part of the biosphere, this is a plus. the human pollution, or at least the human CO2, is a plus. But then there's the other side, that we're using the atmosphere as a toilet. And we don't need to keep flushing our waste into the air, because it comes back at us, and we have to breathe. We have to breathe this stuff, and as we know, it impacts asthma, it impacts kids and their developments, and soots. You know, all of these things. We have technologies that we can mitigate or completely and eliminate them from having to be disposed of in the atmosphere.
Now,
so there's. Go ahead.
Here's a question for you. I agree with you on that. But at the same time, these people are spewing clouds of garbage up into the atmosphere, and I don't think we need them doing that. Now, one of the theories that I've seen, and here on the show we do a lot of astronomical shows and whatnot, as well as earthquakes, volcanoes, that sort of thing. We haven't really done any shows on HAARP, but that's for another time. A lot of people are thinking, and I'm with them, that since, I would say probably the late 1980s, the color of the sunlight has changed. It's not as yellow as it used to be. It's like it's more of a bluish tint, I think.
Agreed.
And a lot of people think that one of the things that they're doing is attempting to try to protect the population on the ground from these extrasolar energy, whatever it is that has changed the light of the sun. Because I have noticed it over the years. It's like, it's bizarre. It's almost like it's too bright now, brighter than it used to be because I'm not imagining it, because other people have noticed it too. Do you think that they're doing something to try to protect the population on the ground?
It's possible. Or maybe that there's information or coding coming from the sun that we require, and they're protecting, they're keeping that from getting to us. That's another possibility. Because the reason I ended up in Colorado was another meteorologist, and he worked at the USDA up in Fort Collins. His job was monitoring the sun and the ultraviolet. That 305 nanometer line is critical. It's critical. When you open up the atmosphere, when you open up and allow that threshold of that ultraviolet energy to come in, mutations begin. And that's maybe those mutations are maybe that the energy from the sun at those frequencies in that near ultraviolet is growing stronger. There is much, I guess it's new age material and channel material that say our sun is going to change.
Right.
That it will follow Sirius. That star was a Rudi star, as it was described about 450 years ago. Now it is obviously a blue-white star, and so I don't know the quality of that information, but I suppose it's certainly plausible. And maybe a change in the sun is the end game that the power elite have. That they know that something is going to happen, some unwinding, some magnetic pulse from the sun. Will happen on this December date in 2012. And so they're either keeping those energies from arriving on Earth and allowing the mutation of plants and animal life and humans as well ahead of time from, essentially saying being prepared for the arrival of those new energies. I don't know. It's just speculation. But if the sun is the driver of the climate, it's not CO2. Sun is the power source, and our relationship between the Earth and the sun is just now being more understood. I promise you, there will be some realizations and some discoveries that in the next 5 years will profoundly change how we look at the sun and our relationship with it.
Yeah.
I suppose there's a reason that even 10,000 years ago, many of the gods were all related to the sun. Who knows? That'd be a fascinating area of research to just really dive in and to be able to share with people.
Yeah, our science producers, he was on this past Saturday. In fact, it was our highest rated show. He was on with a gentleman that owns a radio station down in Baja, Mexico.
Okay.
And he's seeing evidence that the crust of the Earth is actually slipping a little bit. And that's the reason why we're having all of these huge earthquakes and all the volcanoes going off, and the magnetic pole is moving. It's not actually the magnetic pole that's moving, it's the crust that's moving and dragging along the magnetic pole, and yada yada. And we're on the crust, of course, so we're moving with it. So, and the thought is that the newer energies that are coming from the sun, especially with us being in this new cycle, high cycle with the sun, that's going to peak next year, actually, that they may be using these chemtrails to spread these clouds, either to A, block the extra radiation, and it seems like we're on the same page with that, or B, keep us from seeing something that's actually going on up there.
At the sun.
Either at the sun or in orbit over the Earth or approaching the Earth. Yep.
I can get behind that as well.
Yeah.
I can get behind that as well. Soho is a fascinating site, and if you're watching the sun, you've probably seen the Soho imagery, Solar and Heliospheric Observatory. There's all kinds of anomalies that show up on that imagery. All kinds.
Oh, yeah, and so, no, it's not anomalies. It's all reflections off the lens, you see.
Yeah, cosmic rays.
Because Mercury's over here, and Venus is in the second house, and, well, that's not really a spaceship on there. It's just a reflection, and there was a bug on the camera. There's a space bug on the camera.
Well, because I had kind of been watching Soho, and there was so much solar activity in 2003. The aurora, and I got time lapse the aurora, and it's great photography, so I was watching Soho, wait for the next solar storm so we can go out and watch the sky.
Right.
And I started seeing these anomalies, and there was actually another man by the name of Kent Stedman. And his website was Cyberspace Orbit. The man's since passed, but I think his site may still be up. And Soho anomalies were one of his features. So I started, watching these C2 and C3 movies on the Soho page and seeing these odd ships showing up. And I have Soho imagery on my website. You can go over and look at that. And there's some odd things there. Some craft that look like they're, at a minimum, tens of thousands of miles in size.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We actually had a guy on, what's his name, Bob Evans, and he has he and his wife do a tremendous amount of research into this. They're collecting Soho images all the time, and he literally sent me hundreds upon hundreds of these images of these things, and they're all you can see the trails coming out behind them. You can't tell me that this is just an anomaly on the lens or a reflection. Not when there's sparkly trails coming out from behind these things that are as they're coming into the solar system.
And I started kind of posting those on my site and got some really good ones. And then I got a letter from the press relations person at the Soho site. And he's saying, no, you got to be careful. These are all just anomalies and this and that and that. And I wrote back and said, oh, you're so full of it. There's other stuff going on here. And he didn't write back. But within 2 weeks, all of the data, all of the imagery had at least a 1-pixel Gaussian filter run across them.
Yeah.
And so they just blurred it out. It doesn't exist anymore, people. Don't look here. The sun is not a hotbed. It is not access to and from the solar system. It's just a nice warm ball of nuclear fission going on out there that keeps us all warm.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Yeah.
Now, one of the photos that you have at your site, and I was actually I'm glad you brought that up, that you have this have those images at your website, because I completely forgot about that in the flurry of activity. You've got one that looks like it's some type of antenna array around the sun.
Doesn't it, though?
Yeah.
And it's huge. There's two pictures. There was one where you could see it almost looks like it's 5, 6, 7, 8 arms, kind of beginning to unfold, and then once it's unfolded, it's just two very long ones. But it almost makes me think that they're working some kind of acoustics, some kind of sound, some kind of resonance. And so I was almost beginning to expect that they will participate, or these other civilizations will participate with whatever's going to happen at the sun as it goes through a change, the end of this cycle or whatever. But I suppose there's probably a reason why the Mayans were particular on the end of an age. I don't know. There's a lot of things we could draw into the sun. A lot of old ancient knowledge that we could kind of bring up and say something's going to happen. The end of an age, the end of a day, the end of a cycle, the end of a processional cycle. There's something going on.
Now, you're a professional weather guy, so let me...
Loves telescopes.
Yeah, let me get you in on this. In your opinion, I don't know if you've even followed this, are we seeing a higher number of meteorite impacts on the Earth? Because I seem to be seeing a lot more reports of damage, people getting hit.
I'm seeing them too.
Do you think it's an actual ramp-up
what
of
I don't
activity?
know is if the internet is just allowing a very quick communication from all parts of the world. Because I know the military is aware of those kind of bolides, re-entering the atmosphere, and they can track them. They know essentially how large they are by the heat that's released from those re-entry events. But what's curious, as you've said, is they're reaching ground. They're making it to the ground. And they're not burning up on the way in. So they're fairly substantial, at least golf ball sized. So is that a precursor to something else rolling through the solar system? I don't know.
Excellent segue, by the way, because my producer said that you have, you do in fact have some Planet X information on your website.
We love Planet X.
Oh, that's my producer, Boris Artemenko, science producer. This is part of the... that's essentially what I've been doing for the past 10 minutes, is feeling you out about this, to see what your theories are on this. That's one of the reasons why he believes we're seeing the crustal shifting, is because of the gravitational and magnetic energies from this thing as it's passing through the system.
It's very possible. I know of people who were in the Air Force and briefed on such an event, on such the existence of that and the beings that accompany that particular planet. So the powers that be are aware, and I am serious thinking that's a big part of the end game. How they're going to get themselves out of this economic mess, how they're going to get themselves out of the chemtrails, how they're going to reveal the truth of who humanity is, what our history is, and what our origins are. I think those are all disclosures that will happen during the course of this year. At some point, I expect that if Planet X is going to show up, that it'll be the amateurs that see it first, especially those that have infrared telescopes. That it'll be the amateurs
that is exactly where our science team is going. Infrared imaging. With telescopes. Boris is attempting to, I believe, put a system together now.
There's a company by the name of Planewave. If he's got a little money, it was some engineers from Celestron that kind of struck out on their own and started a country, Planewave, Planewave, and they've got some amazing gear. And one of their scopes is, I believe, a 12-inch. It's gold. It's got a gold mirror, gold-plated mirror. They want to call it that, a reflector, to deal with the infrared. And I would love nothing more than have one of those installed over the garage.
Yeah, you're not the only one. I'd like to have one of them things in the back of my pickup truck.
You know it.
Yeah, you're driving around like, what do we see now? That would be great. We're also some of the other things that we're also looking at. While I have you on the air here, since you've got the chemtrail experience behind you, and you're watching what's happening astronomically, as well as being a professional weather guy. John DiNardo has also been on the show several times, and he is constantly watching the jet stream and the anomalies we're seeing in the jet stream. And as a professional weather guy, tell us, what the heck is going on with the jet stream? Why is it doing what it's doing?
Well, it's not right, is all I can say. it's so contorted. It's doing strange things. I think there's an agenda of drought in the Southwest and the Southern Plains, and then everywhere else, it's an oscillation between the extreme and then the extreme of flood. And Australia would be the prime example of that. The Queensland in particular. You remember that biblical flood that they had last summer?
Right.
I mean, it was unbelievable. But that's the weather events that this technology, and that, for me, very clearly illustrates the motives of the people that are behind this. If it were just the planet, how do I want to say this? I think there's something coming at the end of this year. There's some D-Day, some decision day, some evolution of humanity, some opportunity for evolution of humanity. And I think the powers that be will use every tool that they have to keep the common man in a stance of victimhood. Whether they're victimized by God because the weather is not providing them with crops, whether they're broke because they've been foreclosed on because they lost their job to NAFTA. It's a matter of engineering the consciousness of humanity. There's no price that they're willing to put on that. They'll spend what they have, and they'll spend all of it and then some. But it's about keeping us off our balance, to keeping us not healthy. Fluoride in the water, chlorine in the water, aspartame in the food. It's about keeping us from being clear and capable of participating on a spiritual level, not a religious level, but at a spiritual level, in the opportunity that we have as a species to evolve. And if we're dumbed down, if we're lazy, if we're unfit, if we're sick, and if we feel victimized, then we're not able to participate in the creation of our own future. We let and defer those decisions to someone else that we might think might know what's good for us. And if we can train them through 12 years of schooling so we can condition their responses to authority, then they're easy. They're a very pliable and malleable workforce and populace. And I think we're very close to that end game. And if they need to play with the jet stream, then they will, because they can. And what will be curious is karmically what will happen to them. Because every action has a reaction, and every action has an accountability attached to it. And this is something I'm sure they've considered but haven't really thought about. That this will impact these families and these peoples for a long time to come, to try to make this debt to this planet, to this people, good. They're going to have to rectify the situation. And that's going to take a long time.
Well, isn't it sort of too late to do that now? I mean, they've been screwing with the atmosphere so much. I mean, how can you reverse that? You can't suck in all the stuff.
Yeah, I agree. It seems to be late. It seems to be late. But ultimately, these are decisions that are individual. It's you and it's I, and how we deal with them, rather than letting the nightly news and the Katie Courics and the Tom Brokaws tell us how to react to something. We've got to be sure enough within ourselves and calm enough and centered enough to be able to react to these things, rationally and sanely. As much as they'd love us to go mob out so they can, mow us down with the guns. That's not going to happen in a few places, but not here.
Obviously, it looks like they're trying to foment that with the Occupy movement, and that deal doesn't seem to be able to take off the way they want it to.
No, I think we'll be given another opportunity. We've had some dry runs, and I think the Occupy movement will evolve. Something will happen. The work of Half Past Human and Cliff High and their linguistics work, kind of analyzing how the people react to things. Global and essentially global revolution has been around a long time, and the energies around that are just growing. And until something changes, until the Fed goes out and we get our money back, until the FDA quits clamping down on cures for cancers and for diseases, the people are not going to be placated. They're just not.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because two things. We've had Cliff High was actually our first guest on the show.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
And it managed to crash all our servers and cost me a bunch of money because I had to upgrade virtually everything and pay for some extra stuff. But that's fine. I expected that, and Cliff loved being on the show. Another guy that we had on, what was his name? Jerry Smith, I think.
Jerry Smith, yeah. He's passed now.
No, he's still alive. He was on, I think, like a month ago.
You mean the author, Jerry Smith?
No, different guy. I don't think he's written any books. He's the only known survivor of pulmonary fibrosis.
Oh, no, I don't know that Jerry Smith.
Yeah, I think that's his name. I can't. I might be getting that incorrect. But he had to look far and wide to find somebody that could actually cure it. And he's basically sends people over to this doctor, and the doctor's in Germany. And the doctor's using, he's basically using the people's own blood to figure out what's wrong with them, and then tailor a cure for that particular person. And one of his things is that the FDA is just
stupid.
They're a building full of clowns.
Yeah, they really are.
Well, there's an agenda that we're surrounded by on this show.
Yeah.
But what I was getting with Cliff is that, as you know, there's a gap in the data, and it starts, I believe, next month.
Yep. Like what? 9th, 10th of March.
Right. And we had Paul Begley on. Do you know? I don't know if you know him or not. He's a pastor out of Indiana.
Okay.
And he has done a lot of research into the 188-day cycle of earthquakes. The next one is due March 21, 22. And the thinking right now is that it's going to be Baja or possibly Death Valley in the United States.
From the Syria.
Right, from the research that our guy has been doing on it. But I've seen another interesting aspect, because there was some clues in one of the past WebBot reports. I believe it was the number 10 followed by I think like a CXC or something like that. Somebody says that may actually be a initials for a solar flare.
I could see that.
A 10,
I can see that.
An X class, say, bigger than we've ever seen before, that'll just knock the grid down. What do you think about the possibilities of something like that happening?
Well, I just talked about this on Facebook 2 days ago. With the atmosphere so much more conductive, what would an EMP pulse look like now? Would something that would normally be, have a radius of say 500-800 miles now go out 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 miles, because that current, that pulse, can travel more effectively. So I have not downloaded Cliff's latest report. I kind of read up on his things, but I did not go get the last one. But I know that gap in data has shown up.
Yeah.
In prior runs, and if it's still there, and he's still writing about it, then I'm curious. I'm going to go get the report this evening and read. But I could easily see this technology and an EMP pulse, and I'm familiar with somebody who's a dreamer, who has visions on a regular basis, and those kind of storms and that kind of change to humanity is something that he has seen frequently, along with losing California to the ocean. That was a very powerful dream that came last August 15th. Essentially, just California is gone, and a part of it slips off, and it's there's like 950 miles inland from the coast. It's broken. And then, of course, the reshuffling of humanity away from the oceans begins. They're going to begin to come inland. They're going to begin to come inland in droves. And maybe that's a good thing why we've had this housing crisis, is that there's a lot of empty real estate, a lot of city houses to be able to absorb this. China's building cities inland on the edge of the Tibetan Plateau. That this is a city that could house 5 million people, and there's not a soul living there. Why are they building cities inland that are empty? What are they planning for? What are they seeing? What's been discussed? And so those near the coast need to be on alert and open to their inner guidance. Because if they have a dream that they need to get inland, then it's time to heed that and start moving.
Right.
It's time to start moving.
I need to get you as soon as you can over to our YouTube page, and you need to watch the replay of last Saturday night's show with Boris Arnamenko and Alex Bachman.
Okay.
What you're saying right now, and they're going to be on again this coming weekend because the subject that we're talking about with them is so important, and you have hit the nail on the head exactly, sir, about what they are talking about. Now, Alex, he is a Spanish radio broadcaster down there in Mexico, Spanish language, and he speaks English just fine. And he was on the show last Saturday.
Okay.
And there is a town in Baja where they have a science center. It's the biggest. I think it's the biggest one in Mexico, as a matter of fact, and it's in Baja. And there was a group of ladies that went in there for another purpose, and they came upon a meeting that was going on in there, and there were scientists literally from all over the world. And apparently, from what he's telling me and what he said on the show Saturday, is that the geologists were out changing some sensors off the coast of Baja, and they found a bulge on the ocean floor off of Baja, and they expect something big to happen, like real big.
Real big. Enough to where they're considering how to evacuate the cities.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
And that's a city of what, 300,000, something along those lines.
The name of the city is Ensenada.
Yeah, Escanada.
Yeah. Yes, they were on Saturday, and there's been a whole bunch of misinformation about the story because unfortunately it was leaked highly inappropriately. So we had him on to tell us the actual story of what happened. And he's going to be on again Saturday night. So if you have a chance, tune into the show Saturday night, because we're going to be talking about this a whole lot more.
What I do, because I did read a story to that end, and that was probably 3 weeks ago. But what was not shared with us in that story was the cause. What was the information that had brought them to be so concerned and to have that meeting in that city? And it was the bulge. That was new information for me.
Yeah.
That was new information.
Yeah, exactly. They the people that leaked the story didn't get the entire story.
Yeah.
So Alex has been helping us clear it up, and it's a hell of a story. I'll tell you that. And
you got to wonder. California's a beautiful place. It's a beautiful city. So much of it's paved over, but it's still a pretty sweet location. And I've come across some stuff that the people that have chosen to live there there's Lemurian and Atlantean descendants there, and that's what they're drawn to. They just need to be by the ocean. They're kind of that attached to that life, and so they're kind of coming back to do another experience with the water. And that would explain why, regardless of all the warnings or all the dreams that they may have about it, that they can't leave. They just can't tear themselves away from it. There's a reason or an excuse to stay by the water. And so, you kind of live and die by those kind of decisions.
Yeah, so, apparently there's going to be more dying than living at this point.
Lemmings to the sea. Lemmings to the sea.
Yeah, and actually one of our producers lives over there, so she knows all about this. In fact, if I had I don't even remember the date it was on, otherwise I'd pull up our show notes for the people to look at so they could see what we're talking about at this point, but they can get over to the YouTube page. It's the Sun Sky Mysteries channel.
Sun Sky, because I have the YouTube
Sky Mysteries. And it's going to be last Saturday's show. It's the one with, I think it's the one with the most views. It's Alex talked about it on the air, I guess, and it's essentially gone viral now.
That's good. Oh, Alex Jones?
Alex Bachman.
Oh, Alex Bachman. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I think this year is going to be full of those kind of discussions. It's just Sun Sky, if I can spell sky right.
Yep. Sun Sky Mysteries.
S-K-Y or S-K-Y? Yeah,
S-K-Y, just like...
Got it. Just like it sounds.
Just like it sounds, man.
Got it. I'll have a look.
Yeah, make sure you get over there and watch last Saturday's show, and then make sure you tune in again this week, because I think it'll give you some more information for your Facebook endeavors.
Good old Facebook.
Yeah,
no, Cliff has kind of got me thinking more about the expanding Earth theory and how it explains very logically so much of the geological evidence that is left on this planet, why the ocean floors are so much younger, the splitting and opening, and why the volcanoes are doing what they're doing. And one of the natures of this universe is that it is expansive. Right. And that's just the way the creative energies are. They're always expansive. They don't tend to contract. Not that there isn't the expansion and the contraction happening at the same time, but that's probably what the Earth is getting ready to do, is just kind of stretch her wings, and who knows, maybe we'll add another 10 miles to the diameter, maybe another 120 miles to the diameter of this planet. And
that could very well be what's causing the crustal slippage.
And those sky sounds.
Yeah.
All of those odd sounds that we're hearing the world over now. Have you seen those YouTubes as well?
I happen to have one of the recordings right here. I'm going to play it right now because I love to play it. Here we go. Now, I have heard that most of the ones that are on YouTube now are fake, and I'm not sure if this is one of the original ones from Europe.
From Ukraine.
Yeah, I think it was from the Ukraine, and it's one of the better ones. It's the sounds that people are hearing are just. I can't wait. I actually, and this is going to sound really stupid, but I can't wait to hear one myself.
I'm with you there. I want to hear it. I want to feel it.
Well, because I've always got my Sony interview recorder with me, and it's got a very good microphone on it.
Those are handy, aren't they?
I can get a good recording of it.
With right and left sides, and yeah, they've got great audio. I've got one too. Yeah, it's a great little tool to have in your pocket. I'll usually keep the little Nikon still camera, but it does 720p video as well, and has a great audio. So it sounds like the Earth is moaning. It just really sounds like the Earth is moaning.
Yeah, so it's and I'm actually buying into the expanding Earth theory.
Yeah.
Because
I'm a convert.
I mean, it logically it just makes sense, man. That all of these monolithic structures and everything makes so much more sense if the Earth is smaller and there's less gravity.
It could. Because
how are these ancient peoples moving all of these things around? I mean, you got one of two choices. Either they had one of three choices. Either the Earth was a lot smaller and gravity was a lot less. They had help from space aliens, or they had some advanced machinery that completely has become non-existent and there's no evidence of.
Yeah, that's probably the case. But if the crust is going to adjust, then if Giza is the 0.0 place, or actually that was the old prime meridian, then you could readjust your clocks. You could readjust your latitude and longitudes if you had these pyramids all on separate continents. And if the continents largely stay intact, you may lose the edges and so forth and so on. You may get some mountains in the middle. But if you've got markers left behind, then you could regrid the Earth. Or at least understand just how much it's changed during the last round of expansion.
Well, that's an interesting theory. I've never heard. That's a new one. I've never heard that one before. So you think?
Well, it makes sense. It just makes sense.
Because the pyramid appears to be some type of a universal structure. Because they got them in South America, Central America. They got them in Egypt, and I think there's some in Asia too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, there are many in China. Many big ones in China, even.
So the thinking is that these might be markers,
mileposts, markers, surveyors' marks.
An expansion period, we'll be able to make the proper adjustments.
Yep, you can just redo the latitude and longitudes again. Once you've got the new pole settled in and it all kind of settles down, you're going to need to quote unquote GPS it again. So, and that would help. That would help.
I certainly hope our science producer Boris Artemenko is listening to this broadcast, because I'd love to hear his thoughts on that. That's
Me too.
That's a new one. I have never heard that one before. That one's great.
That one's well. I don't know. I would like to go to Egypt. I would really like to see those pyramids. I'd like to see a Syrian temple too. That would be probably first on my list, and then go from there. There's just, I don't know. I think once you've kind of been educated in some of the esoteric things, then the geometry is curious, and the shapes and the hieroglyphs. I just, I'm very much into past lives, and so I'm pretty sure I've been there at some point in the past, the distant past, if you will.
Now, politically, do you suppose that one of the reasons why there's all that turmoil over there to keep people from going over there?
No, I think the turmoil's there because the people are fed up with their governments. I think the people are just bloody fed up. This dreamer I talked to you about earlier, he saw an energy coming from outside this planet, energizing the Giza complex. And it was just like somebody had just flipped the switch and turned them on, and that was 21 January last year. 3-4 days later, the Arab Spring began in Cairo. So it's like these etheric, these external energies have to come in, and then that provides a carrier signal or a support for the people to stretch their wings and try to become independent again, or at least not be able to say, I'll put up with Mubarak for another 40 years. They're just not going to do it. They're not going to do it. Yeah. And there's a consciousness that is in waves washing across this planet. And we're never going to be able to go back to the 50s. We're not going to be able to go back to the 60s or 70s. There's no going back. And so I think in this day and age, it's futile to be conservative. We've got to be bold, we've got to be aggressive, and we've got to be progressive. Because time moves forward, time doesn't go backwards.
Right.
And so we need to be gaming and visualizing and discussing and mission stating what we would like our future to be, to consist of, what that experience would be like for us and our children and grandchildren. That's the discussion that I see us as a planet having on a greater and greater scale, as we move into maybe not an Arab Spring, but maybe it'll be an American Spring.
Now, don't you think that the powers that be and the evil side of this are going to attempt to take advantage of this? Because obviously
Probably.
They are in Egypt.
Yeah, I think disclosure of their past deeds is going to be part of them trying to control this discussion. That they will, throw out these bombs that maybe the moon landing didn't happen, or maybe there's chemtrails, or maybe there's weather control, or maybe the Federal Reserve is not all it's cracked up to be, and maybe Pearl Harbor was staged, and maybe, and that would keep us again off our feet. We're going to be unstable, and so I think they would use even their past deeds as we head into the end game to keep us from getting it, or maybe as we do get it, then they try to change the subject, and that would be the best thing they like to do is talk about themselves.
Yeah,
so
that would be.
Could be.
That would make the most sense, because I can't picture these people letting go of the power that they have.
Well, probably not. Not unless
take the rest of us with them.
Unless there's really nothing left for them to hold on to. And if the sun is going to go through a change and the earth is going to expand, then, what's the point in, collecting taxes? You're going to need to be collecting firewood. It's just our priorities may be profoundly different in 12 months' time. Profoundly different.
Yeah.
I hope.
Well, we can all, those of us that are awake and aware, we can all sense the changes that are occurring right now.
This is true.
And I think
true.
Virtually everybody across the spectrum that is paying any attention at all to what's going on realizes that there's some serious changes going on.
Well, and I don't know that many of them know how to how to deal with them, or how to even, integrate those changes into their lives. What happens when they figure out that there's, thousands of civilizations and thousands of sentient civilizations that have the capability of faster than light travel, in the solar system. What does that do to the religious beliefs? How does that change Jesus? How does that change Muhammad? How does that change these things? And I don't think that's something that, is discussed very often on Sunday morning when people go to church. But it may be something that is a very real issue in the near future.
Yeah.
And, it just, the last thing the politicians want to have to change is their worldview. And ETs would absolutely change their worldview. And I think this is what, Cliff's work has been, very important in putting at least in front of some of us, is that a worldview change is going to happen. And I don't think you'd be drawn to his work if you weren't, kind of hungry for that to get underway.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's first you have to wake up and realize that you've been lied to all of your life, and then you have to start re-educating yourself.
Yep. We're going to have to see the beauty in the aftermath.
Like, the stuff you learn in grade school, and you go, wait a minute, if you read the guy's biography and his actual handwriting, that's not what happened. And that's
no,
what
it's
they taught
not.
me in school. And it's like, either they lied to me in school, or somehow somebody went back in time and changed what he was writing.
I suppose that could happen.
Yeah, I suppose that could happen, but I very strongly doubt it.
Have you dug into any of Project Pegasus?
No, I haven't. No, I haven't.
Have you heard of it before?
I have heard of it. I haven't really had a chance to get into it. The latest thing I've been looking at is something that you have on your website called Project Cloverleaf.
Cloverleaf. Well, Pegasus was time travel. Pegasus was time travel.
Okay.
And we have 3 whistleblowers. One of them is Laura Eisenhower, the granddaughter of the President Eisenhower. And that in 1967, via reverse engineer technology from Roswell, they have been able to time travel. They are fond of using children to do that work because they're the clearest. They're the ones with the least amount of social bias. So they can come back and tell the cleanest story, at least in their opinions. So I think they have an idea of what's going to happen and how they want to deal with it and who they want to save and kind of how the whole game will go down. But again, we've got whistleblowers and we have free will. So, regardless of what they think is going to happen, we can still change things. We live in a quantum realm. We are the observer. We are the creators. And what they saw, 15, 20 years ago about the future doesn't have to be written in stone. Does not have to be. Everything is a potential. Everything is a possibility. So,
Oddly
Project
enough,
Pegasus.
a few weeks ago, when we had Bob Evans on, the last time that he was able to join us, there was a gentleman that has done a lot of research into the Project Pegasus. Now that you've tickled my brain again, I remember about it, and especially with the Eisenhower name associated with it. And the guy that did the original research on it happened to call into the show.
Oh, nice.
So we spent an hour and a half talking to him about Eisenhower and actually meeting the aliens out at the one of the airfields. I think it was Murtaugh Airfield, where he met up with the aliens.
Yeah.
And that was highly entertaining.
Yeah, I bet it was.
I mean, even if it's not true, it's just the concept of it is extremely entertaining, and apparently there are eyewitnesses and whistleblowers that were on the scene.
Yep. Isn't that crazy? That we could have, would be 50 plus years into all this. 50 years of being able to go to Mars for lunch. 50 years of being able to visit, a nearby star. 50 years without oil and petroleum. 50 years without having to deal with cancer and Alzheimer's and AIDS and, all of these, scourges of this civilization. We didn't have to go down that road. But the military was so attached to their big bombs and their military-industrial complex that, they couldn't see the greater good.
Which brings us to Eisenhower's military-industrial complex speech.
Wasn't that a powerful speech?
And that maybe that is the exact reason why he gave that speech.
I think it is. And then Kennedy gave his secret society speech 10 days before he was assassinated.
Yeah, that is some of the strangest coincidences that I have ever come across. I mean, once you learn about the Eisenhower thing and meeting the aliens, and supposedly we had an exchange program with these races, where some humans went there and some of the aliens stayed here, and his military-industrial complex speech, like he became disillusioned with the entire program. And that's almost what it seems like. Is like he finally said, "You guys are crazier than a bunch of crap house rats."
And we're going to go to the moon regardless.
Yeah,
maybe if we get the
way.
people out there, they'll see it, and we won't have to tell them that there's other races. That we can just have that disclosure as part of the discovery of our experiences in and on the moon.
Yeah, and they managed to hide that from us too.
They gave it all they've got. Gave it all they've got. Nice.
Well, I believe that actually we were scheduled to be on the air for an hour tonight. We've been on the air for an hour and a half, so I think we've done a remarkably good job of filling up the time and more.
Well, I guess no commercial break, so the clock is a little free.
Yeah, it is. I don't do commercial breaks. Maybe someday in the future, but you know, it's my show, it's my network and my damn show, and I'll do whatever I want on it.
And you should.
Yeah, I wish more shows had the freedom to be able to do this type of stuff.
This is so true. This is so true.
But at any rate, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I mean, you've given us. It's bizarre because you've been able to help us tie the chemtrails and everything else that's going on, especially with the scalar weapons and all of this other information. And I think it's helping to educate our audience bit by bit by bit as we get more and more pieces of the puzzle on the table for us to put together. And hopefully we can get that done before it's too late.
Yep, that's it. It's just the chemtrails are just one pixel in the picture, just one part of it.
Now, before you go, I wanted to try to get pin you down on something else that you said, that the sky is actually pixelated. Did you say that earlier?
It's digitized. It's digitized.
In what way? How is it digitized?
Well, because I think there's zones which are separate from other zones that they can apply an electromagnetic solution to and get a change in the atmosphere. And that isn't applied generally, it's applied to a very specific zone. And I think the chemtrails mark boundaries of where that manipulation happens, or those chemtrails denote axes along which it happens. And so watch when they do essentially the crosses in the sky, the angles that are exactly 90 degrees. Notice where the trail crosses. There will be a differential in the behavior of the trail that gets crossed. One side is different from the other. And so they use these trails to segment the sky so they can contain what they do to just one zone. It's like a child in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Maybe a 4-year-old kid playing in one end of the pool, but his actions, his waves, his compression waves, his longitudinal waves will impact the entirety of that body of water. Much like what happens in the sky, if left uncountered, will impact the entirety of the planet, or at least one hemisphere.
And this is why these photographs of the chemtrails, where the chemtrails going along, and there's it looks like there's lines that go through it.
Yeah.
Where it all of a sudden just stops.
It ends. And it's denoting a boundary. One side the trail is glowing, on the other side it's dark. Why? Is it ionization? Is it moisture? Is it the chi, the organ of the atmosphere? Or is that where a scalar solution has been applied? You know, I can't tell which. I can't. I don't have the technology to tell.
And it's so bizarre because it looks like, I mean, we're looking at one of the images from your website where the chemtrails going diagonally from the top left down to the bottom right.
Okay.
And it looks like it starts, stops, and then just a little bit where it starts, and then it stops again, and it looks like almost like if you're writing with a pen, and you've taken your finger and used like olive oil or something and drawn a figure on the paper, and you try to write over it, the pen won't write over the oil.
And then sometimes the trails will smear, and you'll see a patterned smear where the trail will break up and dissolve into separate waves. But all it's there doing is making whatever they're doing to the atmosphere visible. And then they can immediately measure it from space. They've got orbits, or satellites, and these are run by Honeywell. They're run out of an Air Force base just outside of Colorado Springs. And they've got low, mid, and high orbit birds. There's at least 30 of them. And so they have, from space, surveillance of what all of these trails are doing. And then you can see the powder puffs coming out at the bottom. Again, that gives you a measurement of the downward movement in the atmosphere. If the powders are on the top side of the trail, then you have lift. You can measure the lift in centimeters per second. And with that, boom, it goes into a model. Then you can generate convective available potential energy, or the CAPE. You measure the moisture, then you know how much rain can come out of a thunderstorm. You know, this is just real-time surveillance of the atmosphere. And sadly, the National Weather Service is clueless.
They're out of the loop.
Yeah, they're stuck in the 70s, and they're in a worse situation than the private guys, because they're, one hand at the government not knowing what the other hand is doing. They don't know. They don't know. And it's also a little bit interesting that every head of the National Weather Service for like 50 years has come from the military. They're generals.
I didn't know that.
They're generals. It's military. And I always thought that was a little strange, that there weren't civilians running the National Weather Service, but it's the military. And the National Weather Service went through a huge, quote-unquote, modernization. Whenever the term modernization comes up, run for the hills. They completely redid the surface observing network across this continent. Not just this country, this continent. They took out the human observer. This began in 1988. Right. And the human observers are essentially out of the equation by 1995. So we're more than 15 years into that. It's the human observer that would have noticed the contrails and added them as a comment to the surface airway observation. It's the human observers that would denote how much of the cirrus cloud cover is there. That's all been handed over to computers. And the computers are commanded not to look above 12,000 feet. Where is all of this happening? Higher than 12,000 feet.
Yeah.
So that's one of the ways they've hidden it. And something else they've done with the surface observing system is they've put in so many of these sites in, C, D, and F grade locations, where they're not in grassy fields that are representative of the surrounding environment. They're next to runways, they're next to parking lots, they're next to buildings, they're on buildings, they're next to air conditioning vents. And so when you do that, they read hot. They read 2, 3, 4 degrees hot, and that gives you ammo to say the planet is warming.
That is one of the things that got me off the global warming bandwagon, is when I started looking at where all these weather stations are. There's a fellow that runs a website, I can't remember what the address is, but he tracks all of these stupid weather sites. They're like in the middle of a parking lot, underneath an air conditioner, for goodness sake.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
This is where they get their weather information from, is from an air conditioner blowing on a weather station.
Yep. And so all of a sudden the daytime high is 89 instead of 86. And 3 degrees like continuously. It skews up. It skews the data. It skews it. So then you can, do what you want with it, and you just roll with it, whatever agenda that the politics are dictating that you follow. And as long as, anyway, that's a whole nother show.
Definitely another whole nother show, because that gets me just gets me so mad, because it's like there's these damn weather stations, and they're like underneath an air conditioner on the roof, on a tar roof, and it's like, what are they thinking? There's a field right next to it.
And it's unreal, because there's a site guy from the local National Weather Services that has to go out and approve the sites. And we had one installed at KPVI, where I was working out in eastern Idaho. Mm-hmm. And it was because they wanted more city representative data.
Right.
But where the sensor went was on a little grass strip that was no more than 6 feet, maybe 7 feet wide. There was a few fruit trees there, but then there was a cement wall that was not 4 feet from it, and on the other side of that wall was the station's satellite dishes, many satellite dishes, and there was black pavement. That it was in that little enclosure. Then there was on the south side of the sensor, the thermometer sensor, was the sidewalk, and then there was the street. And so again, it was another site that shouldn't have been set up. If you can find a site that's representative of a grassy rural environment, don't set it up. But they wanted urban data, so they're getting urban data.
Yeah, and it's all skewed.
It's skewed. It's skewed. It is skewed. Anyway.
One of the interesting ways that people, and where I happen to be right now, we have a street out on one side of the building. Okay, it's a street, parking lot, and everything else. On the other side, on the very other side of the building, we have 30,000 acres of forested land.
Okay.
You go out front, and it is just absolutely blazing hot. And you go out back, it's 10 degrees cooler.
Yeah.
And they're taking these weather stations, folks, that they use to provide us with the weather information so that guys like Scott can give us a forecast, and they're sticking them on the wrong side of the building. Instead of sticking them in the forest where they can get a better read on the actual weather, they're sticking them out in the middle of the parking lot where there's heat reflecting off of it.
This is true. This is true. This is true, and if the site doesn't have, 60, 70, 100 years worth of history, then, it's always a warm site, and there's nothing that the guys back at the Climate Data Center in Asheville, North Carolina have to, essentially quality adjust the data. And when they quality adjust data, rarely do they cool it off. They've tended to warm it up more than anything. So, I don't know. It's an interesting world that we're living in, Bill. It's a very interesting world.
I don't know if I call it interesting.
But I can't say
the word that I'm thinking on the air. It's one of the bad words that we don't like to say. Well, anyways, we've killed another 10 minutes here.
All righty,
so now it's definitely time to end the show. Well, listen, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. I really, really appreciate it. This has been some great information that you've been giving us today, man. I really
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And this will be up on the YouTube channel probably tomorrow morning.
Okay.
And I'll send you an email or get a hold of you by Skype when it's up on there, so you can link to it off of your Facebook page.
Sounds good.
Okay.
And maybe one day we can all get our telescopes out together and watch this planet come in. How does that sound?
That would be even better. Do that all over the world and get it up online. That would actually be excellent.
That would be cool. That would be cool.
Okay, Scott. Thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it, and we'll be in touch. Okay.
Alrighty.
Bye.
Bye.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, was our new friend, Scott Stevens from weatherwars.info. This guy is an actual professional meteorologist. He's the real deal. And he just gave us some excellent information about chemtrails, weather forecasting, Planet X, Earth changes, earthquakes, volcanoes, sun changes, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And my name is Bill Zam, and we will see you for our next scheduled live show on Saturday night with Boris Artemenko and Alex Backman once again. Tell your ma, tell your pa, tell your friends, tell your enemies to show up for Saturday night's episode, Surrounded by Idiots. Have a good evening.